So after the terrible reception of Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, people wanted more Michael Myers. They wanted him back. Prayers were answered, so by 1988, Michael came back with a vengeance in Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. How could he breathe in that thing? What's up, everybody, and welcome back to my Halloween film series review. Thank you so much for clicking here. I really appreciate it. As stated before, I will be doing all of the Halloween movies, minus the Rob Zombie versions, followed by a ranking afterward. Just in time, or try to anyway, for Halloween ends. So stay tuned for that. So it's been 10 years since Michael's reign of terror as he escapes once again and goes after his 7-year-old niece, the last of Michael's descendants. So guys, we are at part 4, the one that saved this franchise. Yeah, as I stated in the last review, nobody wanted to see a bunch of kids being killed by a bunch of witches. Nobody wanted that. Nobody really asked for that. By the time 3 came out, Michael was already the mascot of this franchise. He was the king. He's the face of Halloween. As good as intentions the filmmakers had for Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, nobody wanted that. Nobody asked for it. So, with prayers being answered and the studio listening, Michael was brought back, and that's what we got. We asked and we received. And people just didn't warm up to 3. Like, nobody wanted that. Just nobody warmed up to 3. As I said in that video, Michael was it for this franchise. The damage has been done. So with that being said, let's start out with the positives for Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. I like the whole atmosphere. You open up with this movie to where you see this countryside barn looking like place, to where you see like the Halloween decorations and just the way it was lit up, the way the coloring was, that whole autumn feel with this whole beginning credit scene. And it was a good way to like actually open up with this movie. It makes you know, like the filmmakers wanted you to know that this is completely different from what 3 was. It's going back to the basics of what 1 and 2 was. You have this barn with the different decorations and just the shot and just the leaves, the dead leaves on the ground, and just that whole autumn feel. It was very surreal. It was very interesting. It was a cool take to open with this. And it's very effective. And then you see it transition to this rainy night to where you see these paramedics transferring Michael to another place, which, when has that ever worked out? I mean, we're already 4 in and you already know that's not going to work. But it really does show Michael Myers' return in a big way. Again, it really lets the audience know that this is what you asked for and this is what you'll get. We have Michael Myers, who is awesome, played by George P. Wilbur, who takes over from Dick Warlock from 2. He did a really good job in this. It wasn't no Dick Warlock. It wasn't as smooth or slick as I mentioned in Halloween 2's review of Dick Warlock. But he was good enough. You know, George P. Wilbur was a pretty good candidate up to this point for Michael Myers for 4. We get a great kill scene starting off with, referring back to the paramedic scene whenever they pick Michael up from the institution, where he kills this guy. He bashes his head in, and then not before pushing his thumb right into his skull. That's when you know that, hey, the filmmakers really went all out. They want you to know that he means business. You know, his return is prophesized for this, and what a one to start off with.
No, I still don't understand.
George P. Wilbur did a great job resurrecting this character. He's actually one of my top favorite stunt people to play Michael Myers. Again, no Dick Warlock, but still good in his own way. I also like that whole bandage wrap thing that he had going on, since he didn't quite have his mask just quite yet, not until later on in the film. You see him with all these bandages and his like wrapped around. And in a way, you could kind of call that as iconic, just like The Mask, because there's like several YouTubers that I've seen on here to where they actually have that in the background when they're talking about this franchise. I do admit it was pretty cool. Because, you know, he's like fresh out of the institution and they never want to show his face. Otherwise, they'll take away the fear and the mystery of this character. I thought that was pretty clever. Wrapping him around with bandages. And like the first kill you see him do in that garage, he's still wearing those bandages. And then he gets the mask later on. And again, I thought that was pretty clever. And like I said with the kills, you got great kills. Like I said with the thumb through the forehead kill. And then you get this one girl skewed by a shotgun, which is funny. Whenever I was young, my friend at the time and I were arguing. And my friend was like, there's no way he could stick a person with a gun like that. There's no way. But even back then, I knew how strong this character was. He's Michael Myers. He's practically inhuman. So we were probably arguing for a good couple of days before I finally convinced him. And it's like, okay, what else could have shoved her up against the wall like that? But hey, you do you. You think whatever you like, dude. Point being, that was a pretty good kill. Like I said, when the writers decided to bring Michael back, they wanted you to definitely know. They wanted you to know. Though it's not as graphic, you don't get too many graphic kills in this, but you get enough. I mean, the graphic kills will come later on in the series, but still, the way they brought him back for 4 after the bad reception of 3, it's good enough. It's satisfying enough. The way they brought this iconic character back, it should be good enough for any Halloween fan. Like I said, I do admit it doesn't go hardcore with the kills. That's not until 6, which we'll definitely get into later. But it's good enough for 4. It's good enough for the return. And the pacing was very well. There's not a moment in this movie that I felt bored. This is one, ever since I've got the 4K version that was released last year along with the first 5, ever since I got the 4K version, this is the one that I've watched the most. And before that was released, even the box set that was released like some years back, this has never really been one that I watched the most. But ever since the 4K got released, I watched it. I was constantly watching it. Before this review, the last time I watched it was probably about a month ago, and then I watched it again. And so it's, I don't know. Something about that, this is the one out of the franchise that I watched the most so far on 4K, which looked amazing, by the way. Again, going back to the pacing, it never felt boring. It didn't drag on. It was perfect, to me anyway. Then you get the introduction of Danielle Harris, which was fantastic. For a debut role, she was in a few things before this, but this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this was her first major role, this and 5. And she did a really good job in this. She plays the niece of Michael Myers. She tries to figure out why, this is all happening, come to terms with her uncle being this lunatic psychopath. But they write it in a good way. They write it in a really great way. There's this bully scene which kids can be cruel to where they keep on teasing her about her uncle being the boogeyman, so obviously she already knew. It's just written in a way to where you deeply sympathize with this character. I mean, she played it off pretty well. And Danielle Harris, she became somewhat of an icon in the horror community. I mean, she was fantastic. And I also like the whole plot line to where this character, Danielle Harris's character, is related to Laurie, and that was actually her mother. I mean, it never shows who the father is. It shows like Michael roaming around some pictures. There's one picture that kind of raised a little bit of a question mark, where it looked like it was her father, so maybe it was the Jimmy character from 2, where he actually survived, and Laurie and him just made a life for himself, and they got a kid, and then she died somehow. So there's that. I like that whole scenario. It put a little bit of a twisted spin on it. Again, this character, the last of Michael's descendants, which is the reason why he's after her anyway in the first place. And this, correct me if I'm wrong, but this whole requel scenario that's big today, I'd like to think that it actually started in the late 80s with Halloween 4, because they skipped over 3. I mean, how else would you have done that anyway? Because there's no way you could incorporate the Michael Myers storyline, bring him back, and have 3 be real. So I guess this isn't really a fair assumption, but still, the whole requel thing, they skipped over that one and then treated 4 as an actual sequel to 2. So in a way, you could say that the requel scenario that's big today kind of started back then. But again, I might be wrong. But this is the late 80s we're talking about. I like to think so. Again, I know you didn't have no choice. Like if you bring an icon back after kind of being set aside the movie before, there's no way you could actually tie that in with that said movie. So anyway, moving on. And I can't do a review without mentioning the great Donald Pleasence. Once again, he returns as Dr. Loomis. And once again, he delivers just perfectly. If anything, he says even more lines that even tops the first 2. There's like one particular line where he's actually talking about that night and what he has been through. And they gave him a little bit of a spice, like they showed that he scarred himself, which is actually left over from when he supposedly blew himself up at the end of 2. And I thought that was a good character trait. I thought that gave him a pretty cool spin. And it was, kind of made him more of an iconic character in a way. And again, like I said, Donald Pleasence, he nailed it. He definitely nails it.
We're not talking about any ordinary prisoner, Hoffman. We are talking about evil on 2 legs.
He's got literal scars that he can finally show off to let everybody know that he means business and that this evil is real.
I don't want anyone to have to live through that night again.
And you got Ellie Cornell, who plays Rachel, one of the final girls of this movie, and I've got to admit, she was perfect as this character, this strong-willed woman that tries to protect Jamie from Michael. And she just shows strong-willed. She shows every trait in the book that a final girl should have. Serious, strong, and just all-out will to fight any evil that lands her way that this man brings. The gumption, the strong will, everything you'd want in a final girl, you just buy her as the hero of this film. You just buy her as a hero. I'm not really going to compare the two with Ellie Cornell and Jamie Lee Curtis. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a tie. But if I was to be a little bit blasphemous here, I'd say Ellie Cornell was probably a little tad bit better than Jamie Lee Curtis. Because Ellie Cornell, she had more of a tough as nails side to her. Hey, I'm not going to deny that H2O revokes even that. But I'm just saying, for this one, Ellie Cornell kind of wins me over. And you have an amazing kick-ass ending to where you have Rachel in the car and Michael's on the top trying to get to him. And then she slams on the brake, he falls down, and she runs him over to that, whatever it was, that ditch. And then the cops come, they start shooting at him, and he falls in that little hole. That was iconic. That right there is the ultimate ending to a franchise like this, or not to the franchise itself, but to a character like this for this particular film. I like the whole angry mob plot. A subject we all know that was brought up in Kills, and I have some thoughts about that, which we'll get into in that film's review. But the way they executed it off in Halloween 4, I thought was pretty decent. And it gave the movie a little more of a reason for you to cheer for like these people trying to take back their town and trying to save these others, especially after what happens to the police force in this. What Dr. Loomis says to the sheriff, he's like, you haven't got a police force. This man may be the only defense you've got. They executed that off pretty well. But was it a match for Michael? Of course not. It just gave the film that extra edge is all I'm saying. The only negative I have is the mask. Michael's mask. I've never been a fan of the mask in Halloween 4. To me, it just seemed too plain. It definitely didn't look like William Shatner, which is the original OG mask. And I know there's a good plausible reason. Either they didn't have the rights to get it back, or they just couldn't because they lost it. Whatever the case may be, the mask in this just didn't look all that It just didn't look right. It was just too plain, and it didn't match up even with the box cover. Like, you have this, that looks nothing like the mask in the movie. Plus, they did the same for the 4K release, which was just released last year. And I don't know, to me that's just like false advertising, and I guess they had to do it that way because complications probably did rise on the set of this film where they had to settle what they got, but they couldn't really advertise it as the mask that they used in the movie, otherwise it probably would kind of turn away some people. But they did what they had to do. But again, I never really been a fan of the mask in this one. It just, to me, it always felt too plain. It wasn't really scary. It wasn't iconic. Put this back up. And it just wasn't that memorable. But in the end, guys, it was still a great comeback to an iconic character, something that this franchise definitely needed. If they had gone on with their plans to do a Halloween movie each year, just about the season, it would have killed this franchise off. So the writers of this movie, thank you. Thank you for bringing the man himself back. I really did enjoy this installment. Other than the mask thing, I really did enjoy this installment. It was a great comeback for an iconic character such as Michael. It was a good way to re-jumpstart the series and should be on a pedestal. So, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, what was your thoughts on it? Did you find this to be the right and appropriate move for this series? Were you somebody that was rejoiced after finding out our favorite serial killer was coming back to the franchise? Or are you somebody that just didn't find this particular installment of the franchise that enjoyable? Are you somebody that just preferred the first two, or even three? No judgments here. Leave me your comment down below and give me your thoughts. Thank you so much, guys, for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. Like, subscribe, comment, and share the big four. Make sure to hit that bell icon so you don't miss a thing. And I will see you on the next one. Peace.